Hey guys, Gregor for Personas here, and I'm so excited to present a brand new hybrid virtual instrument to you that is new in Studio One Pro 7.1, Cinematic Lights. Cinematic Lights offers a rich blend of real orchestral ensemble recordings like brass, strings and woodwinds that have been heavily processed, and those can be combined together with analog hardware synthesizer recordings and field recordings for some incredibly complex sound textures, amazing for sound design and cinematic effects. Cinematic Lights comes with more than 100 multi-samples and presets, and also has a ton of loops that get you started right away. Here's a couple of my favorite presets as a teaser. Wow, I've been playing for several hours with this instrument already, and I absolutely love it. It's my favorite virtual instrument in Studio One Pro right now. Hopefully you will agree. But before we get into the presets and the deep dive, let's take a look at the installation procedure. Once you've updated to Studio One Pro 7.1, you should go to the Studio One menu here at the top and select Studio One Installation. And here under Available Downloads, you should find Cinematic Lights when you search for it. In my case, it shows up under Installed Content because I already have it. And after you installed it, then you'll find it just like any other virtual instrument here in the Instrument section of Studio One Pro's browser. It can be added to any song with drag and drop. Like I mentioned before, every preset inside of Cinematic Lights consists of 3 separate layers, and they can all be processed, panned, sequenced and modulated in really complex ways, completely independently from each other. But you do not have to do that if you don't want to dive so deep and just have some fun with the instrument, because it's also incredibly hands-on and intuitive. Let me show you. First of all, if you just want to use the presets which sound amazing, you can just go here into the navigator like always in Studio One and select a few of these sounds just to get an idea. And if you want to build something from scratch, which I always like to do, then you can use these drop-down menus down here to directly access the multi-samples and select different recordings for each of the layers. In my case, I went ahead and for my first layer, which is the yellow one, notice how I can blend between them with this matrix, which is just so cool because it can also be automated, but more on that later. So for this sample here in yellow, I went for brass muted. This is an actual real recording and it sounds like this. That's very lovely, amazing sounding brass in my opinion. And I'm blending that together with a synthesizer sample, okay, that sounds like this. And the third layer I'm using in my patch here is some kind of static crackle. Right? And each of these sounds can have a different start and end point, and it can also have different attack and release settings. So for example, notice how the layer in red, that's the third layer, it needs a bit of time to reach full amplitude, whereas the strings, for example, get to full amplitude pretty quickly. And then I can use this matrix in the middle, which is just so awesome, to blend between these three layers, right? So if I go more towards the top, to the yellow layer, I get the organic brass sample here. If I go to the left, I get the processed analog synth strings. And on the right, I have the field recording. When you combine these three different sound sources into one sound, you get something with incredible width and complexity that could sound like this. Well, I get instant Blade Runner vibes from that. If you want to dive deeper as a sound designer, then you will be happy to hear that all envelopes and parameters of this virtual instrument can all be accessed and tweaked to your heart's content under the hood. To do so, just click on the arrow here at the top of Cinematic Lights, and this brings you right into the editor where you have different settings for each of the layers. For example, samples can be set to monophonic or polyphonic on a per layer basis, as you can see, and you have a different multi-mode filter available for every sample, as well as 2 LFOs, a ton of modulation options, a gator that's also per layer, and an EQ and a pan modulation. And you have a global arpeggiator and repeater, which can be toggled on a per layer basis here from the start menu. And as mentioned before, all of these parameters can be automated in your project, so they can be ever evolving, ever moving. To do so, I would recommend that you just click on the edit mapping button right here. And then once you touch any of the controls in Cinematic Lights, you can directly create an automation track for them by just clicking on this A here, or you can hit Option and A on a Mac or Alt and A on Windows, and this will add a modulation lane in classic Studio One fashion, and you can immediately start, adding automations for all of your controls. With so many vast sound modulation options, it can be difficult to find a starting point, where to begin, right? But please know that all of these settings are just for us geeks, and you can just have a ton of fun just using the initial UI with the matrix. Just move that around with your mouse or automate it, and you can have a ton of fun with that. So please don't think that you have to get the maximum out of this instrument to have some great sounds. The presets are a fantastic starting point. Speaking of presets, you should also check out the Musicloops that come with Cinematic Lights to combat writer's block and get instant inspiration. You find these if you go to the Files tab of Studio One's browser and then navigate to the Sound Sets folder inside of Studio One and then to Cinematic Lights. These are different kind of MIDI loops with an associated preset that you can pre-audition here from the browser. And if you find something that sounds inspiring to you, you can just drag and drop that into your session, and Studio One will directly quantize the MIDI to fit with the rest of your arrangement, and also load the Cinematic Lights preset with all of the associated samples. So this is really an amazing workflow to get started. Now, this was just a very small teaser of what's possible with Cinematic Lights in Studio One Pro 7.1. Enjoy our brand new hybrid virtual instrument, and thank you so much for watching.